Hi guys, welcome again to my channel. In today's video I will explain the various elements of IAM policy documents so that we can get an idea how to read and write IAM policies in AWS. So first of all, let us see how IAM policy looks like. So as we know, IAM policy is a JSON document in which we have several elements. So there are optional top level elements, and inside then we have statements, and inside the statements we have some elements. This diagram I have taken from AWS documentation. I will provide the link to this documentation in the description box as well. So as we see, the JSON policy document includes these two elements. One is the optional top level element, and the other is one or more individual statements. So let us see these elements in more detail. So the first element, which is the top level optional element, is the version. So version specifies the version of the policy language. The available versions are 2012 1017, which is the latest version, and 2008 1017, which is the older version. The older version still works but lacks some features introduced in the new version. As a best practice, you should always use the latest version. And if you do not specify any version, then by default this older version will be used. Then the next element is a statement. Statement is used as a container for the following policy elements. You can include more than one statement in a policy. Then inside this statement we have the first optional element, which is the SID. SID is the statement ID, and it is used to identify the purpose of the policy statement. It will be like a string which you can use to differentiate between multiple statements. If there are multiple statements, then you can have SIDs in those statements to differentiate the purpose of those statements. Then the next important element is effect. This is a mandatory element, and the allowed values for this element are allow or deny, and it indicates whether the policy allows or denies access to the resource. So when we are writing a policy, the effect element tells us if this policy allows or denies access to the resources that we will define in other element. It tells what the policy will do after evaluation, whether it will allow or deny access to the resource declared in the statement. The next element is principal. Principal, this is required only in some circumstances. What it means is, let us see, this is an entity that is allowed or denied access. Principal is any entity that will be denied or allowed access. So this is optional because when we attach the policy to an entity like user, role or group, the principal is automatically inferred as that entity. In case of resource-based policy, principal is necessary because the policy is attached to the resource. You must indicate the account, user, role or federated user to which you would like to allow or deny access. So why we are saying that it is required only in some circumstances? Because principal is a required parameter in case of resource based policies. In case of identity based policies, the principal or the entity is inferred automatically based on the request that is coming from the entity that is considered as principal. Next element is action, which is a mandatory element. So action includes a list of actions that the policy allows or denies. For example, EC2 start instance or S3 get object or IAM create user. means whatever action you want to take in this policy, you want to allow or deny in this policy, you will specify under actions. Then the next element is resource. This element is also required only in some circumstances. It specifies a list of resources to which the action applies. If, for example, if you create a resource-based policy, this element is optional. If you do not include this element, then the resource to which the action applies is the resource to which the policy is attached. We will see all these elements in next slides with examples, so it would be more clear. Then the other element is condition. Condition is also optional, and it specifies the circumstances under which the policy grants or denies permission. Condition element is also referred to as condition block. You can use as many combinations like Boolean operators and keywords like string not like, ARN equals, ARN not equals to fine grain your policy. For example, you can add a condition like if the request comes from a specific IP, take some action, or if the request comes from a particular user, take action on a resource, etc. So there could be many combinations which you can add in a condition based on your requirement. So these were the main elements of a policy which we frequently use. There are other elements too which you can use according to your requirements, and there are some elements that are mutually exclusive, such as action not action or resource not resource. So I will provide a link in the description box to the examples also, which you can later refer. Now let us see some examples. So this is the first example of a policy. This policy allows the implied principal to list a single Amazon S3 bucket named example bucket. Suppose we have a bucket called example bucket. So we will attach this policy to a principal, and that principal would be able to access the S3 bucket, list the S3 bucket named example bucket when we will attach this policy. What is the meaning of implied principal here? As you can see there, we have not specified the principal element here. The implied principal means the principal will be the entity, the user group or role with which this policy will be attached. And this is an identity based policy which will be attached to an identity. And you can see here we have given a version which is the latest policy version, and we have one statement here. And the statement, as we said, statement is a container inside which we specify the elements of the policy. So first is effect allow. We are saying that this policy allows the action S3 list bucket to this resource example bucket, means in the example, this example bucket, in this example bucket we have the action list bucket allowed, and this policy will be attached to an identity like IAM user or IAM role, and that identity will be allowed to list this bucket. So this was one example. Let us see one more example. This is example 2. This policy allows members of a specific AWS account to perform any Amazon S3 action in the bucket named my bucket. So we have a S3 bucket named my bucket, and with this policy, an AWS account, any member of the AWS account that we will specify here would be able to perform any action on this S3 bucket. So here we have given this version, latest version, and inside the statement we have given this SID, statement ID. Effect is allow. We are allowing this principal is our account, and then the action is s3 dot asterisk. Asterisk means all the actions are allowed in S3 for these two resources, my bucket and the objects inside my bucket. So we are allowing these operations, S3 operations, all S3 operations in this resource, this bucket and the bucket objects to this account. So we can see this is a resource based policy because we will attach this policy to a resource. Here we have specified the resource. It allows any action that can be performed on a bucket or the objects within it. It allows any action that can be performed on a bucket or the objects within it because the policy grants trust only to the account. Individual users in the account must still be granted permission for the specific Amazon S3 actions. Let us see one more example. In this example, we will see how we can use conditions in our policy. So what this policy does is this policy allows an IAM user to stop EC2 instances, but only if the instance tag owner has the value of that user's username. So the EC2 instance that the user wants to stop or start, that instance should have a tag named owner, and the value of the tag owner should be the user's username who is requesting to start or stop. So this policy should be attached to that user. So here, as you see, we are using the version latest, and inside the statement we have two blocks. Its first block is we are allowing action EC2 start instance, EC2 stop instance, and the resources AWS EC2 instance, any instances, and the condition is string equals AWS resource tag owner should be the variable aws.username. So when this policy is evaluated, IAM replaces the variable aws.username with the name of the actual current user who is making the request to start and stop the EC2 instance. So this AWS or username, this variable is known as policy variable. This is a feature that lets you specify placeholders in a policy. When the policy is evaluated, the policy variables are replaced with values that come from the context of the request itself. And here you can see we have two blocks inside the statement. Second is effect allow, and the action is EC2 describe instances, because the user who is making the stop or start EC2 instance request should be able to see the EC2 instances in his console. So that's why we have given describe instances access as well. So these were the examples of policies, and we saw the various elements of the IAM policies. So I hope it was clear. In the later videos, I will try to give a demo for policies where we will create policies in the AWS console. So if you like the video, please leave your valuable comments and subscribe to my channel if you have not already subscribed. Thank you.